Hello and welcome to Too Many Movies, the podcast where we discuss DVDs, Blu-rays, and even the occasional VHS tape. I'm your host, Hal, and today I got a very special guest with me. Chris, introduce thyself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Chris. I'm the Shafe half of the Spacechris7 channel, in case you didn't know that. If you did know that, congratulations. You're one of the few people who can read stuff on Twitter. Whenever we did a Shiny cast, and everybody was like, where does Spacechris7 come from? But primarily I'm on the Spacechris7 channel, where I dub a bunch of stupid shit with my friends, and I occasionally dabble in my own editing stuff, which is taking me forever, because I work.
Yeah. Oh, work. Ain't it the worst?
It's fun. You know how it is, Hal.
I do. But, I can't just live off of editing for James, so it would be nice.
I wish I could.
I know. Wouldn't it be nice? It would be nice. Anyway, speaking of working, astronauts they work when they're in space. Hey, we watched a movie about astronauts. It's called Apollo 13.
Oh boy.
All right, Chris, you wanted to talk about Apollo 13. I have only up until this most recent watch through, I had only seen it once in like 8th grade science class. And I don't own it in my collection, but I was curious to see, hey, would it be worth owning in my collection? So I watched it. So what's your experience with this movie? Like, give me your thoughts on Apollo 13.
So I remember, I can't even remember when I first watched Apollo 13. I just remember I watched it because it's one of my dad's favorite movies, and we watched it together, and I fell in love with it. At the time when I watched it, I remember I was going through a very big phase where I was just taking in every ounce of information that I could related to NASA at the time. So this just kind of helped me go, wow, NASA's really freaking cool. They do shit. They keep people alive. Other people don't do that.
It's a good way of putting it, yeah.
And I will say, when you go in depth to all the technical stuff and the behind the scenes that Ron Howard went through to make this movie as authentic as possible, while, keeping that small bit of dramatization in there, he did a great job.
Mm-hmm.
He did an amazing job. But yeah, no, this is definitely up there for one of my favorite movies. I'd put it in my top 10. It's not my top 5, but it's in my top 10.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I mean, as I said, like I had seen it once before, and I definitely thought it was good. Like it was one of those movies where like I'm told like, oh, it's one of those good movies. It's like, yeah. And I did like it a lot, watching through this most recent watch through. You said that like Ron Howard did like a lot of research into the authenticity of all this, right?
So when he was designing the set, he requested from NASA's public records actual design documents for the Apollo Command Module and the Apollo Lunar Module. So everything that is a set piece in that movie is built as accurately as possible to how NASA flew the spacecraft to the moon.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you'd kind of have to be as accurate as possible. Otherwise, what's the point of making it like a biopic, No, but like I think that is like a real thing when it comes to depicting real events like this. You want to be as accurate as possible, because they're going to space. Like that's kind of a huge freaking deal. And as I was watching it, I was just like thinking to myself, man, I'm super glad I never wanted to be an astronaut because this shit looks terrifying. Like just seeing Bill Paxton's character like throw up in zero gravity and it's just floating everywhere. I'm just like, oh god, like that would be me. It would be the worst.
So the funny thing about that is it's called space adaptation syndrome, and it's something that like I think like 1 in every 3 astronauts experiences when they first go to space, and even astronauts who have been in space before, they still like will vomit. One of the things that NASA was planning to do with the space shuttle was on one of the early missions, they're like, hey, we're going to test our spacesuit so we can see what it can do outside, and you can, we'll figure out stuff from there. And one of the astronauts just, like, they built into their flight plan, like, hey, if he gets sick, we'll do it on this day instead of at this time.
Okay, so, like, yeah, I mean, all that planning, dude, like, that's another thing I noticed when watching it was, like, th they're just, like, all these, like, plans that go into making this behemoth of a rocket to, like, shoot it into space, and then things still go wrong, and they're still planning, and, all the planning, because like, they're on the case, like, as that ship is floating through space, like, you got guys back down in Houston that are just, like, there 24/7. There's that one scene where, like, you see a bunch of guys, like, sleeping on the floor of Houston, and I mean, it might have been that scene, but there's, like, another scene where, like, I think it was, like, the surgeon was like, the guys up in the spaceship, they need to be sleeping, but it's like, that's kind of impossible to demand that from them because they're in kind of like this enclosed box floating in the vacuum of space, like, it would be kinda hard to sleep during that.
In Jim Lovell's book Lost Moon, he goes into detail a bit about how the flight surgeon, like you said, wanted them to sleep, and apparently they would just take pills to keep them awake for at first. And then Lovell's like, yeah, so we kind of started just falling asleep, and we'd get yelled at by Houston when we're trying to actually do stuff later in the mission. And it's like, I understand, man. That shit is terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I can't even imagine being in that situation because it's, like, so far away. Because like, you're literally stranded away from any civilization, like, the farthest you could possibly be, just not be on the planet, like, you're all alone up there. Obviously, you have 2 other guys, but they're also alone out there, like, that's just how crazy of a situation you're in like that. So, like, it's like, apologies if I can't fall asleep, It's kinda hard unless my body puts me to sleep.
One of the fun things is if I remember correctly, Apollo 13 was to date the yeah, Apollo 13 holds the record for the farthest distance that humans have traveled in space. Uh
Oh, okay.
due to abandoning having to land on the moon, which is like a weird record to have considering everything that happened during Apollo 13. Um
Yeah.
I know in the movie when Swigert, Kevin Bacon's character, flips the oxygen fans, how in the movie it's just like, oh, he basically sets the bomb off.
Mhm.
In the real world, that didn't happen for like another like couple of minutes until after he flipped the switches. So it's
Right.
like, and also in the, I know both in the movie and in the real world, we always attribute Houston, we have a problem to Jim Lovell, but it's actually Swigert who said it first. And
Okay.
then Lovell repeats it to Houston after they're like, wait, what do you mean?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So that's another thing I wanted to talk about is like the Houston, we have a problem line because like that's obviously one of the more famous aspects of the movie, and it's obviously like integrated into pop culture at this point. And I was kind of wondering because I'm like, oh, it's like this very famous quote. Is it actually accurate? Because one thing I've noticed with a lot of like very famous movie quotes is that they almost always get like misquoted. Like people will say, Luke, I am your father, but Vader never says that in Empire Strikes Back. There's like a famous quote attributed to Casablanca where it's like, play it again, Sam, but it's never said like that. It's said like, play it, Sam, in Casablanca. But here, you know, Tom Hanks actually says, Houston, we have a problem. And it's like, oh, so you actually say it the way that it's remembered. Like, that's really interesting to me.
It's very close. Lovell actually says, yeah, you can find on YouTube, and I recommend if you want to go more in depth into Apollo 13, you can find the communications between NASA and Houston and Apollo and well Odyssey at the time because that was the command
Mhm.
module name.
Right.
You can find the audio, and Lovell says, "Houston, we've had a problem," instead of "we have a problem." So
Well,
that's the only tweak that Ron Howard did, but
right.
it still gets the point across very well.
It gets the point across, but I'm saying, like, in the movie, it says, "Houston, we have a problem," and that's the, quote attributed to, like, pop culture, like, that's the quote you hear in pop culture more often, so that makes sense. Obviously, yeah, I guess they had to tweak it a little, coming from real life, so even though they wanna be as accurate as possible, it's still a Hollywood film, so I get it, you gotta tweak some things around. Like you said, when Swigert, like, uh, What did he do? He did something with the oxygen tubes or something like that. Like, what exactly did he do?
So on the first three missions to the moon, on Apollo's 11, 12, and what would have been 13, NASA required the astronauts to stir the oxygen tanks, which meant that in the oxygen tank they used to have a little fan because there's a thing called stratification in which a very cold gas will turn into both a liquid and a gas, and it'll cause basically to turn everything into like a slush. And NASA didn't quite figure out how to. Oh, I should include Apollo 10 into this as well because they went to the moon. They didn't land, but they went.
They went.
NASA didn't quite figure out how to like keep all that under control, and so they had the astronauts stir the oxygen tanks. But by Apollo 13, they were getting a grasp on it, so they didn't really have to do it. It was just more like, well, let's just keep doing it, and we'll figure out what happened.
Okay, yeah. So that makes sense. I mean, so that's crazy though. That like so that's what basically caused it. Just the fact that it was just routine, but for once, like that routine kind of bit them in the ass. It
Um,
seems.
so the whole story with the oxygen tank is both funny and also it just shows that there's a cycle that happens at NASA. So at the I believe it's North American Rockwell that built the command service module. They were testing the oxygen tank, and when they went to remove it from their testing equipment, they accidentally dropped the shelf on that the tanks are in. So they're like, they did their test, and they're like, well, it's fine, nothing bad's gonna happen. Come NASA installing it, they roll Apollo 13 out to the launch pad, and they're testing it. Well, they discover that the thermostat inside the tank won't properly turn off, and the fact that they can't get anything to drain properly. So NASA's like, well, our stuff here is 64 watts. We'll just throw it through that, or volts, I believe it is, 64 volts. Now, the temperature, or the thermostat inside can handle 64 volts, but you're not supposed to really have it always be at 64 volts, because it's only rated for like 28. So NASA surges the power through, and the thermostat gets stuck open, which they needed it to be on so they could turn the oxygen into a gas and just kind of force it on out. But when they did that, they accidentally got it to just be stuck on, and it just took up until, I believe it's 55 hours into the flight, when it eventually just kind of went boom because of the buildup of the pressure that was still just stuck in the tank.
Okay. So it really was human error at the end of the day.
Yeah,
I mean,
like I said,
isn't that always the way?
It's always a cycle at NASA where there's like something happens and there's a safety concern, and then they go, well, it'll be okay, and then something happens.
Right. Oh man, that's frustrating. I mean, that plays into 2001 a little bit, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Um, another thing I wanted to talk about. So one thing I noticed when watching the movie, so like is during the initial launch sequence, like when they actually launch into space, like as the rocket's like shaking, as the pressure is like forcing it upward from, because it's been ignited and stuff like that. I noticed that like they put in the extra detail of having the rocket, the like exterior kind of disintegrate. Like like you see all this like paneling kind of like fall off of it. And I was like thinking like, oh, that's an interesting detail. Like, but I guess that probably would happen because essentially the rocket is just like all these parts to it that eventually do come apart at and throughout like the mission. So like, is it really kind of built up as securely as it could, or is it like just, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that is a rickety fucking rocket, and it could blow up at any point, and yet there's still three guys willing to go on it. Like that to me terrifies me. That terrifies me.
So you're very close. All the stuff that's falling off of the rocket is actually just ice that built up on the side of it.
Okay, ice.
So the first stage used a combination, and I'm not even joking about this, of kerosene, which, when it's refined very properly, it turns into what they call RP1, which the U.S. military loves their designations. So RP1 is Rocket Propellant 1. I'm not lying.
Okay.
They do the same thing for what they call JP, which is just jet propellant.
Right.
So the first stage on the Saturn V uses a combination of kerosene and liquid oxygen, and then the second and third stages use liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. So all the white stuff that's falling off of the rocket is just the ice that builds up on the whiter parts of the rocket, and it, because of how vibration-y everything is and all the shaking going on, it just causes all of it to fall off. There's some very good, very close-up camera angles of the massive F1 engines from, I believe it's Apollo 11, as Apollo 11 launches, and you just see these showers of ice just crashing into the launch pad from just being built up on the Saturn V.
Okay.
And
So it was ice. Okay.
speaking of the vibrations, if you're wondering why during the second stage, when everybody's like, "Oh, we're freaking out because we lost an engine," it's actually due to the fact that the rocket's vibrating too much.
Mm.
So there's a very fine line on how you want your rocket to vibrate, because if it vibrates too much, it causes what they call a pogo oscillation, meaning that the rocket's just basically going up and down like a pogo stick, and they don't want that because it causes instability in the engines. And the Saturn V's computer was programmed that if something like this happens, it can just turn an engine off and continue to orbit.
Okay. Oh man, there's just so much to talk about with like the technical aspects of it. One thing I actually did like was the scene where like they're just like, "Oh, we have like this square peg that we're trying to put into a round circle." And Ed Harris's character is just like, "Well, I guess you better invent a way for that to and for that to happen." And I'm thinking like, "Oh, haha, that's a funny scene. It's a funny joke." But then it's like then the next scene they're like throwing all this crap on the table and they're like, "No, we actually have to figure this out, guys." And it's like, holy shit. And then they do. They actually invent and engineer this like fucking system of tubes for that to be possible.
So they do that because of, like in the movie, they say it's due to the fact that the command module CO2 scrubbers are square, the lunar modules are round. And just like Ed Harris and the actual IRL Gene Kranz said, you gotta fit a square peg into a round hole. And
Yeah.
my favorite part of it is if you go and you look at the instructions they're given, it's like there's a very vague one where it's just like, yeah, you need about an arm's length of duct tape.
Yeah, because that's also in the scene where the guy's just like, about an arm's length. It's just like, Jesus Christ, like an arm's length? You have all these measurements, these specific measurements, like down to like the decimal point, and they're just like, an arm's length of duct tape. It's just like, oh my God, that's crazy.
Oh, I did want to ask you, what were your thoughts on the nightmare scene that Marilyn has on the before the launch?
Okay, so yeah, so there is that nightmare scene where like at first like because I hadn't seen it in a while, like I was just like, "Oh, is this a nightmare scene for Jim or for one of the other astronauts?" But then, it's revealed to be Marilyn's nightmare scene. I thought it was pretty cool, like I was thinking in the back of my head like how accurate is the rocket ship in her nightmare because it's just like she's imagining all of this, but is she aware of like how a rocket actually looks like and what kind of suits they actually wear, or was that like not even a was that not even did that not even cross like Ron Howard's mind?
So it's very accurate, and they don't really establish it too much in the movie, but Lovell went to the moon before on Apollo 8. So
Hmm.
Marilyn has the experience of it before, but this is the first mission that Lovell is commanding, and he's supposed to go land. And in my notes here, I wrote that it's hilarious to me, because, as I say, they're on their way to the moon, and they're still strapped in and spacesuited for some reason.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's the
then,
other thing.
oh, go ahead, Al.
No, because I was gonna say, because like she's not an astronaut. Like, does she know like what they wear or like what are they doing in that situation in the rocket? Because us as the audience, like we see everything that happens because we're watching the movie, we're getting all the different angles of the story. But like she's a character that's not omnipotent or omniscient or whatever the word is. Like, she's a specific character in a specific location. She's not in the rocket at all.
Yeah,
So like,
so
how would she know?
so by the point of translunar injection, which is what they were doing, which is also weird because in her dream sequence, it's just the command service module and the lunar module, which again, I'm sorry, Hal's listeners, I didn't watch the movie. I'm going off of memory. In the real world, when translunar injection happens, the third stage reignites and it kicks them off to the moon. So it's almost there. She's almost got it, but it's not quite there. But the thing that made me laugh was the fact that Gary Sinise, Ken Mattingly, is just he's the only one who's taken anything off, and he's screaming that he can't get his helmet back on when he doesn't even have his gloves on. And it's very much a nightmare, and it made me laugh because it's like that's not how the real world works when it comes to something happening in space. Vacuum will just replace everything in the capsule immediately as soon as it's opened. And the reason why we know that happens is on Soyuz 11, which was the first Russian spacecraft to dock with a space station, or the first one to put crew into a space station. When they came back, there was a valve that's supposed to open to equalize the atmosphere in the spacecraft with the atmosphere outside. Well, it kind of opened in the middle of coming down, so they all just suffocated. And Jesus. Yeah, it's hard to watch because there is, I believe it's on YouTube, but there is recovery efforts that you can see them trying, and it's just like at that point you can tell they're so obviously dead.
Right.
And
so that's allowed on YouTube, but not the funny swear words.
I mean, if you want to go a step further, there's crash footage from Soyuz 1, and you can find the photos of I believe it's Vladimir Komarov who flew that flight. You can find his just charred body being put on display by the Soviet politicians. And also, at the time, the head of the Soviet space program put it on display because he's like, this is what happens when we're not ready.
Oh my god, that's brutal. But, I mean, yeah, you go ahead.
It like, the part that was funny to me was when Lovell gets smacked by the seat coming out. And what's funny about that is, it's not funny, it's terrifying.
It's terrifying, yeah.
And the same thing kind of happened on Skylab too. So Skylab was the first U.S. space station, and when it launched, it lost a part of its micrometeoroid shielding and a solar panel because it's a Saturn V, and NASA didn't figure out how to properly put anything other than the Apollo spacecraft on top of it. So Skylab 2 goes up there to fix everything, and Alan Bean, who also walked on the moon, ironically, before Jim Lovell, on Apollo 12. He's up there. He's on EVA with his buddy and friend Joseph Kerwin. So they're out there. They're trying to get the solar panel to open, and all of a sudden it goes pop and it opens, and they just get flung off the side of the space station. Which, you can find photos of the command module pilots doing an EVA on their way to Earth, or on their way back from the moon. And they all have tethers. So it was funny to me that they weren't quite tethered into place, or the fact that Lovell's straps just like failed in the middle of the whole thing, which was funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny that like you're explaining all of this. It's essentially I am Marilyn in this situation, like watching this movie, because like it's like I think I understand, but I also don't get the finer details. Whereas you understand completely because you're able to point out like, hey, that's not accurate. It's like I mean, as someone who's not as knowledgeable in astronomy and stuff like that, I'm trying to sound smart. I can't. I'm struggling here, but like. But that's the thing. It's like, even though I'm not very knowledgeable about this sort of stuff, like I still really enjoyed the movie, you know, because like it's a very crowd pleasing film. It has a lot of likable actors playing these very likable characters, and it's just an exciting movie. It's very tense. Like I knew going in that they were going to make it out okay because I've seen it before, but, like, even still, like, it really is a tense movie just seeing these 3 guys, like, in this fucking box in the vacuum of space, like, freezing their asses off. It's terrifying.
One thing that they don't show in the movie, which is on the better side, was so every time they opened, so in space when you use the bathroom in order to get rid of your piss,
Mhm.
they open a dump valve and it just kind of freezes and floats off.
I remember that scene because, like, you see all, like, the little yellow pellets just flying out into space.
And
It was a very magical scene.
so during the actual Apollo 13 mission, the Jim Lovell misheard NASA when they were like, so NASA was like, "Hey, try to limit how much you do this," and Jim Lovell just took it as, "Okay, we're not doing that anymore. We're just gonna pee into bags and put them somewhere."
Oh.
So,
Oh. Oh, dear.
so that was I have in my notes here that if the also going back to the oxygen tank, if the only other oxygen tank hadn't been damaged, I wrote, I firmly believe it would have been a warmer return home than what actually happened.
Oh, dear. It's true. It's true. I'm trying to think of other things. So there's this one scene that I do remember specifically from when I watched it for the first time back in 8th grade science class, and that's when uh it, they're like in the ship and it's so quiet except for like you can hear like the tape recorder like flying through, and it's like clearly low on batteries because like the music is like slowing down and stuff like that, and it's just like this very haunting imagery of like this quiet frozen over spaceship, and all you hear is like the guys breathing and the fucking tape recorder just flying through or like floating through, just like slowing down because of lack of batteries. It's absolutely haunting to me, and watching it again I'm like, wow, that really stuck with me over the years.
Yeah, no, that was so in order to get back alive, they had to basically conserve as much power as possible. And they do a good job of it in the movie where the only time they ever really power anything up is for when they got to use the lunar module to uh basically get the spacecraft back to a better landing site on Earth.
Hmm.
And what's funny about all the procedures that they use in Apollo 13 is they on Apollo 9, which was basically Apollo 10 but in Earth orbit, they tested a bunch of stuff like this just in case this would happen. And uh, one of the audio things from the Apollo 13 mission, you'll hear the guy. I know he's in the film, but I forget his name. It's the ecom guy, so environmental controls. He the actual guy. If you listen to the actual like NASA ground loop, he tells Gene Kranz, he's like, "Hey, we might have to think about just abandoning the landing and bring him home in the lunar module."
Yeah, no, that's the insanity of that, you know.
Also, I really liked the dream sequence of Lovell walking around on the moon. I thought that was really
Mhm.
beautiful. And
I did too.
fun fact about that was the red stripes that are on his suit were to differentiate him from Hayes, and this would have been the first mission where they did that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they didn't get to do it on this mission, so Apollo 14 has that honor. The reason why they did it was NASA, when they're watching the TV broadcasts, they're like, when Apollo 11 was on the moon, they're like, okay, which one's Armstrong? Which one's Buzz Aldrin? And then when Apollo 12 landed, they're like, okay, well, now we can't tell Alan Bean and Pete Conrad apart.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
somebody in NASA was like, well, why don't we just paint red stripes on it? And they went, you're a genius.
You're a genius. Oh, that's funny. Um, yeah, was there anything else you wanted to say about this movie?
One of my favorite scenes in the so I'll get to my favorite technical behind the scenes funny thing, but one of my favorite scenes is the reentry sequence.
Mm-hmm.
So in the real world, just like in Apollo 13, when a capsule comes down, they undergo what they call radio blackout. It's because the plasma from the reentry is so thick that they can't send anything to or from the spacecraft.
Right.
Now, there is an exception to that, and what happened was when NASA built the space shuttle and they re-entered it, there's a big old hole behind the space shuttle where they can send data back and forth, and NASA's like, we're going to use that. So they built a series of satellites that are designed solely for that purpose, as well as making sure that, the now the ISS and SpaceX stuff that are crewed, they're like, okay, well, we have all the data from them. But with the space shuttle, they're like, okay, we're now able to maintain communications all the way down. Hooray!
Hooray. Well, that's good. I mean, I think the total blackout thing is kind of good for like suspense in like, the climax because you're just like, oh, are they going to make it? So like I, so that's at least it's kind of horrible to say, but it's like, well, it's a good thing there's that blackout there because then because it adds suspense in the story.
Yeah.
But I mean, luckily now they've kind of fixed that, which is good. Human ingenuity at its best. And then,
I have
yeah, go ahead.
I have two things. So
Yeah.
human ingenuity is amazing, and so the first group of astronauts, the Mercury 7, they were allowed to name their spacecraft whatever they wanted. Big American stars. So Gus Grissom, who lost his capsule after it splashed down because the hatch on it just sprung open.
Hmm.
So he lost it, and he asked NASA, he's like, hey, can I name my flight on... I hate the way that NASA pronounces it. It's Gemini, but they call it Gemini for some freaking reason.
Yeah.
So
Gemini.
NASA's like, yeah, go ahead. And then the Gemini 4 astronauts wanted to name their capsule, and NASA's like, no, 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 we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
So if you go and you read any flights between Gemini 3 and Apollo 9, none of the spacecraft are named, which is
Okay.
absolutely hilarious. And then starting on Apollo 9, the guy who got told that he wasn't allowed to name his spacecraft, his name's Jim McDevitt. He commanded Apollo 9. He's like, I'm going to name mine Gumdrop, and you can't stop me. And NASA's like, okay.
I guess we can't stop him. Gumdrop.
Yeah, so he named his Gumdrop. Like, the names of the Apollo command and lunar modules are funny, because the first two to get named are Gumdrop and Spider, and then you have Charlie Brown and Snoopy, Columbia and Eagle. I think, like, Apollo 12 was named, like, Yankee... One of them's named Yankee Clipper for some reason.
Okay.
And then Apollo 13 is, like, the only cool one out of all of them, where it's called, where it's Odyssey and Aquarius.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's why they were calling it Odyssey the whole time.
What else do I
Okay.
have in my notes? Oh, so the one sequence where they're visited by their families, yeah, NASA didn't do that until the space shuttle.
Oh, so, like, the scene before they launch where, like, the family is, like, on the other side of the fence,
Yep.
like, so they didn't even do that.
Nope, they didn't allow that until the space shuttle because when they were sending people to the moon, they didn't really want to contaminate too much of the spacecraft. And then with the
Right.
space shuttle, it just became like, well, it's routine. They're only going up and coming back down, so yeah, you can visit.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Also, so I don't know if you could answer this, but, like, what was the point of, Marilyn losing her wedding ring in the shower?
So, in Jim Lovell's book, that actually, according to him, that actually happened, but it didn't actually go all the way down the drain. It got stuck on like a catch under the drain cover, and they had to go and ask the hotel staff to get it for her.
Okay. Well, because like,
So
I'm just wondering, because like, it never really plays a part in the rest of the movie, it's just kind of a random scene.
yeah, no, it's just a random scene, and it's funny that they included that because it actually happened to Jim Lovell's wife before the flight. Except, like I said, she managed to get it back, unlike in the movie where it's just gone forever.
Yeah, it's just gone forever. I mean, because like, at that point, like, okay, if it's gone forever, kind of play into that in the movie.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, why include it? Like, yeah, it happened, but like, again, it has nothing to do with like the rest of the story. So it's just kind of an odd scene the more I think about it, but I mean, whatever.
One of
It's just
the
something I noticed.
One of the funny things is when Mattingly gets bumped because he might get the measles, and everybody in NASA's like, "Oh, Swigert, he might not be able to dock the spacecraft, and it'll be a total failure." It's like, why would you add that into the movie? They're all trained professionals.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's supposed to like kind of add to the tension, just to be like, oh, can he do it? But then it's like, oh, well, why wouldn't he? Like, why is he here? Like, really? Uh,
Um, I love the soundtrack for this movie. It is so good.
mm.
Especially
Oh,
the opening theme is just amazing.
yeah. Oh, who's the composer?
James Horner, the legendary James
James
Horner.
Horner. Yeah. Yeah, dude. He was yeah, no, it was really good music. I was like it felt very patriotic. I was just like, "Oh, this is getting me hyped up. I freaking love going to space." And then of course and then when it was like actually tense, it was just like, "Oh, I don't want to go to space anymore. You lied to me.
Space is scary.
Space is scary." Yeah, no, it was really good music. I especially love like, any scenes of like just seeing the rocket and you hear like the trumpet, like, oh, so like atmospheric and beautiful. Like such a good score. Such a good score.
And then the last thing, this is an actual great fun fact that you can tell any of your trivia pals. So when Ron Howard wanted to film the movie, he any sequence where you see Tom Hanks, Bill Paxton, and Kevin Bacon floating, they're actually floating.
Mm.
Ron Howard asked NASA very politely if they could film inside the astronaut training plane that NASA uses to allow astronauts to experience weightlessness. And NASA's like, yeah, go ahead. We're going to help out as much as possible.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, no, that definitely. I mean, that definitely adds to it because, like, throughout the movie where you see these guys floating, I'm just like, how did they do that?
yep, so the plane makes a very steep dive and a very steep climb, and when it does it, the gravity just kind of negates itself. So you're able to
Hmm.
float for however, I think it's like a couple, like about like 15 seconds or so. So
Hmm.
the only problem with it is a lot of people end up vomiting during the ride, so they call it the vomit comet, which is funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anything that involves zero gravity in the film is filmed in a zero gravity environment, which to me was really cool.
Yeah. Well, that also just shows, like, I mean, how intense the filming process must have been because it's like you got to get your like good performance in as you're like floating there for like, a very limited amount of time.
You know who else had very strict filming practices, Hal?
Who?
Stanley Kubrick.
All right. Well, before we get into that, no, I just want to say so, like, usually before we move on to the next movie, we like to talk about like whether I would own this movie or like whether I'd recommend it. Like, do you own it at all?
I
Like on any
don't,
physical media?
unfortunately. I have never been able to find it. The closest I have is a horror version known as Apollo 18, which is in itself a very good B movie, or like C movie, whatever you want to call it.
I remember seeing a trailer for it years ago and like thinking it was real, but of course I was a dumb little child. But like, I've always wanted to see it just to be like, oh, like, is it actually scary? Um,
Apollo 18 relies on the age old, like, very much build up tense. And then when the big bad monsters are revealed, it's like, wow, that's actually a pretty good twist on everything. But
Interesting.
the whole premise of it is absurd to an extent. But it's a very decent, like, I want to call it a C film. It's a very decent C film.
Okay, interesting. I mean, granted, I used to think the trailer for 2012 was real, so, take that with a grain of salt. In any case, I don't own this currently on any physical media. I don't own it on Blu-ray or DVD, but I think I'd like to at some point. It's not I've already seen it already, so like it's not really calling back to me, but honestly, I would watch it again and I guess someday it could find a spot in my collection. So, thanks for the recommendation. I'm glad I saw it again.
Oh yeah, no.
Uh,
If I can find it, I'm definitely gonna end up buying it at some point because it's such a great film.
yeah, I totally recommend it to anybody out there. And before we move on, I just want to say the one thing another thing I also remembered from when I was watching it back in 8th grade is when we were watching it. There's that scene like where the divers like kind of knock on the window when when like they land in the water and like and then the divers come and they like knock on the window to be like hello. Like I remember turning to my friend being like, oh, it's space aliens, and then he laughed really hard, and I was very proud of that because I never made that my friend laugh. So it was one of my proudest moments,
I
and
don't
unfortunately,
I don't
you know,
actually know if the Navy divers actually did that or not, which is like
really,
it's you can find like images of them like tests of doing water recovery tests and stuff, but like I nobody knows if they actually would knock on windows and stuff or just be like assholes and like bang on the side of the spacecraft like, you guys okay?
yeah. You okay in there? It's been like a month. Oh yeah. All right. So yeah, you wanted to move on to 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh my god, I just realized the command module in Apollo 13 is named Odyssey, and the movie is A Space
Ah,
Odyssey.
it's a good indicator that we should move on. All right. So 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's a movie that I do own on Blu-ray, and I'm glad you wanted to talk about it because I freaking love this movie. So was this your first time watching it?
This was indeed my first time watching 2001: A Space Odyssey. I
Nice.
love the movie. However, I feel like, and I watched this with Amber, and
Yeah.
I told them, I was like, a lot of this feels like filler episodes. But it's a very good movie, but a lot of it just feels like it's filler.
hmm No, I understand completely where you're coming from. So, I mean, this is like my I want to say either third or fourth time watching. I don't know. But it is an insane movie for sure. It is absolute insanity. Uh it's one of those movies that I feel like is required viewing if you're how you say cinephile or film bro. But like it is just a genuinely important film in, cinematic history, I feel like. So no matter how kind of weird it is, I think it should be viewed at least once, maybe twice, honestly, because I feel like in my experience, a lot of people who watch it for the first time end up either hating it or just thinking it's okay. And then they go about being like, it was fine. It's not nothing really that great." But then like I feel like it's upon that second rewatch, like once you're familiar with what happened, you do start to get a better understanding of what it's going for. And in case you do appreciate it more. And that is definitely something like again, this is like my third or fourth time watching it. It's getting better and better the more times I watch it. Like it's insane to me just how impactful it is to film history, how impactful it is to me personally. It's one of those movies, man. It's one of those special movies.
Oh no, I agree. I love all the model and prop design in this film.
Oh,
To
dude, it's
me,
so good.
I always one of my favorite conspiracy theories is always, oh, America didn't go to the moon. Stanley Kubrick filmed it. There's a very funny meme of that where Stanley Kubrick is such a stickler for details that they made them go to the moon to film on
Yeah,
location.
yeah.
And
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that meme too.
I have that like frequently in my notes here of just like, Stanley Kubrick, such a stickler. He's gone to the moon for filming, and now at Jupiter, and now the fifth dimension.
Yeah. You know what? Considering he's such a nutcase, he probably would have done that. Like that's pretty accurate. He's such a perfectionist. Yeah, well, that's another thing about it is like only Kubrick could have made this movie.
Oh no,
Like
I agree.
you watch it and it's just like no other director like, and I obviously have mad respect for other directors, no doubt, but like no other director could have pulled off a movie this heady or like this weird. You know what I'm saying?
It's definitely one of those films of its time where it borders on the weird side of everything, but it's so good everywhere else.
hmm
Like going into 2001: A Space Odyssey, I knew very basically what the plot was of just things happen, people go to Jupiter, things get fucked up on the way to Jupiter. Giant black monolith rock appears and weird shit happens.
yeah.
Like I knew all of that, and
hmm
watching it, I was just like, I'm very, very impressed of all the details and the editing and all the effects that went into this movie, considering it's from 1968.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say like it's a movie of its time. I think it's both that and timeless. Like this could have been made yesterday, and I would absolutely believe that because it's just so insanely just it does have elements to it that make it seem like it's from 1968, but it also just doesn't. Like I could see a lot of these film techniques being used today, you know? How long ago was 1968? 50 years ago on or about? Like that's insanity to me. Like something 50 years old can still be relevant to this day, and that just blows my mind.
Oh yeah, no, no, no. I agree 100%. Like, if I wouldn't have known that this was made in 1968, I would have been like, oh, this is like an 80s film. Maybe in
Yeah.
not, maybe 90s because of the special effects at the end. But
Mhm.
like, knowing that it's made in 68, it's just like you said, it's mind blowing that
Yeah.
it like you can look at everything and you can go, that looks like it's done with computer graphics that we have today, not
Yeah.
all this prop bull crap that is very, very detailed.
It's pre-Star Wars, and it looks like, you know, the filming techniques that Star Wars is known for from, like, the late '70s, early '80s, so you're absolutely right, it could have been an '80s movie for all I cared, but I know it's a '60s movie because, well, it was released in the '60s, like, you know, why would you lie about that? You know? Uh, yeah, god, it's funny that you say that you knew the plot going in. It's my 3rd time watching it, I still don't know the plot. I mean, yeah, I know I am starting to get a better grasp on it, and that in that it's like, you know, the storytelling is it jumps around a lot because you start off with the apes in, you know, the dawn of man, like years, literally a millennia ago, and then it jumps to like a quasi future where like, you know, we're kind of this modern man, but we've achieved like space travel or at least travel to the moon at the very least. Like you can travel to the moon, and it's like it's like flying a plane essentially, because like that's what it's kind of portrayed as is like air travel. You see like these long-winded scenes of like one of the characters on this trip to the moon, and he's in like an area. He looks like on a set of like an airplane, but it's in a rocket ship. And you see these stewardesses and hostesses just like walking around in like these uniforms, and they have like everybody treats it as like a matter of fact, like this is normal to them. Whereas like people in the '60s and even people today who we still don't have space travel like this, we're looking at it in awe, like, oh, this is fascinating to watch.
One of my notes says, I like the fact Stanley Kubrick thought Pan American Airlines would still be around in 2001. LMAO.
Yeah, I mean that's the same thing with Blade Runner. How like Blade Runner has like Atari and Pan Am, you know, throughout the future that it takes place in, and like those didn't exist in 2019. So like it's just yeah, sometimes you get things wrong when you're predicting the future, you know.
One of the things that I thought was really cool was the fact that they had the Velcro shoes when they're walking around, and
That yes.
it on the International Space Station. They don't really have those. They just kind of wear socks, but everything on there is Velcroed. So like, if you need to stand somewhere, just plant your feet on this Velcro strip, and you're good to go. So it's like he accurately predicted NASA's just gonna Velcro everything eventually.
Well, that's the other crazy thing. So like just everything about that sequence of like seeing these stewardesses walking throughout the rockets, like the various rockets that they're on. And I'm wondering, like, how did they do that? Because, like, would NASA have allowed Stanley Kubrick to like film in their like zero G? Did they even have like a zero G plane at that time?
So they did have the zero G plane at that time. I'm not sure if Kubrick was allowed to film on it. So I think I like again. I brought this up to Amber. Like the one sequence where the stewardess goes from she grabs a meal tray and then she grabs another one and then she goes to the wall and walks basically almost upside down to go into the cockpit of the plane. And like to me, it's like, how did they do that in the '60s? Because like
Exactly.
you would think like especially with modern technology, it's just, oh well, we'll put somebody in a green screen suit and a board, and they just kind of go there, put them on the board, and then they walk up, and they'll be perfectly fine. And it's like the only thing I can think of is Kubrick did some very wonderful camera trickery to basically like turn the camera while she's walking.
That's probably how they did it, honestly. But like even like scenes of like her walking through like or a different stewardess like walking through like the rocket and just grabbing a floating pen, like how did they achieve that? Like that to me was even more mind-boggling because it's like how do you fake a pen floating in 0 G like that? Because like it didn't look like it was on a string or anything. Like it actually looked like it was floating.
That one I don't have an answer for, but
No, I know.
it was
Honestly,
really cool.
I know it was really cool. Honestly, though, I don't know if I want an answer because that's the thing. It's like this movie is so masterfully crafted that I don't need to know how it was made. I'm almost just quite content with the fact that I believe that Stanley Kubrick went to the moon himself. So you know what? That's just a matter of fact. That is a fact. We're making it an official fact. He went to the moon. Like that. That's how to explain it.
He's such a stickler for details. I'm telling you, he's got to go to the moon, then he's got to go to Jupiter, and now he's got to
Yeah,
travel to the fifth dimension,
exactly.
just so everything's perfect and correct.
He invented an AI that actually went crazy. It's like, yeah. So yeah, let's talk about HAL 9000 and you know that sequence because I feel like that's the most famous sequence of the movie because everybody remembers HAL 9000. They remember Dr. Bauman and all that. Because like you know, when I first watched 2001, I was like, all right, when are we going to get to HAL 9000? We don't get to that stuff until like an hour and a half into the movie. But it is a very pivotal scene because like it's obviously one of the more memorable parts, not more memorable, just it is one of the more famous aspects of the movie is this character of Hal and like this like computer that I said he goes crazy, but honestly, he I don't think he does. I think what happens is nothing in particular. Like he just follows what his protocol is. Like that's kind of the scary nature of this character, but also like just the fact that nothing is really changed about this character. Like he's literally doing what he's programmed to do. It's the humans who are not programmed to do what he does, and that's the part that like kind of makes everything go wrong. Like no matter what, you know what I'm trying to say?
I think what was to me kind of a downer was the fact that they're just like, oh well, if Hal's wrong about this, we're just gonna turn him off, and it's like, but he's controlling everything in the ship, and that's why there's only two of you. So like, at that point, why would you turn him off?
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too. Is like, was he wrong? Because like I don't think he was. I think it's just a matter of well, I think what it happens is like I don't think it's a matter of whether he was right or wrong. It's a matter of he probably purposefully misled them because he was essentially uh following the mission because he knew they would betray him in some way.
I thought the sequence at the after Dave pulls all of Hal's memory chips and stuff. I thought that sequence was very interesting to where it's
Mhm.
just like, oh, now after after everybody's dead and Dave's the last guy alive, it just goes to, oh yeah, we sent you on a secret mission to see whether or not this is alien life. Lamau, everybody might be dead.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too is like, yeah, you wait until then because it's like this super duper uber secret mission. I mean, that's the thing is like earlier in the movie, Dr. Haywood Floyd, one of the character who is at like that conference, like he's saying like, oh, we gotta keep this under wraps, and it's like he specifically brings up the fact that like these characters are just like, well, why are we keeping this under wraps? Like, why do we have to fake this story about an epidemic? It's like and he's just like, "Oh, I know you guys are very frustrated about that." And he never really explains why, you know, because I don't think he even understands like what they're dealing with, but he knows that no matter what, it's a scary fucking thing they're dealing with. So like he just keeps it under wraps cuz that's what you do. You lie just to throw people off because it's better to tell people something they're familiar with than to tell them something they're not familiar with. So it's like, oh, it's an epidemic. It's just like, oh, well, that's scary, but at least we understand that. Whereas like this monolith, we don't know what the fuck it is. How are we going to explain that to people?
I always one of the interesting details I liked was at one point when I believe it's during the sequence where the BBC is reporting on Discovery 1 going out to Jupiter to explore, and Hal asks, I believe it's Dave, or it might be both him, it might be both Dave and Frank, where he asks, like, why has the whole mission been kept completely, like, secret? Like, all of our training is top secret and blah, blah, blah. And both astronauts are just like, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, but we're just gonna follow orders. Which is funny because, like, then Hal is the one who ends up being the one that follows the most orders. Again, he's literally an AI. Like, all he's programmed to do is what he's programmed to do.
I guess you could say that, like, he gained sentience as the movie went on, but that's kind of a stretch because, like, the only reference I have to artificial intelligence being sentient is Data from Star Trek.
Right.
And, well, also the Borg by extension. But, like,
Mhm.
Hal just looks, like you said, it looks like he's just following programming.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, literally. Like, the programming is so good that you can't stop it, and that's the scary part. Like, it's not even the fact that, like, he has ulterior motives and he wants to kill these guys. He literally does not see them as, like, people. He's just like there's that scene where, like, Dave's trying to get back into the ship, and Hal's just like, "This conversation is meaningless. Like, goodbye." It's just like he doesn't. He's not even like annoyed. He literally does not see David as anything. Like, he's just like, "Whatever, man. Like, I have a protocol to follow. I'm gonna follow it. You mean nothing to me." That is really scary. It's like, you don't even see me as a threat. You see me as nothing. That's scary to think how insignificant you are to this AI.
I always liked how when they communicate with whatever ground control was in the film,
Mhm.
the ground control always refers to HAL 9000 as Niner 000,
Yeah, 9 or 000. It's
which
just a bunch of numbers to them.
and it's like, hey, we have our own unit here on the ground. Well, it says that your unit's wrong, so like, but like again, it's just the astronauts are just like, well, let's turn it off if it's wrong. Like, why not just go put the thing back? And if he's wrong, you just work out a solution at that point.
I mean, that's the whole thing. Is like they're literally uh 18 months of flying away from Earth at this point because they're almost to Jupiter. So like, if something does go wrong, they're fucked. But if something doesn't go wrong, something else could go wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't know. Like, they are literally just stranded with no options other than what they think is the right option. Because, like, I mean, they just don't want to risk anything, I guess.
To me, I think the biggest travesty of this film is we don't get to see a whole lot of the interior of Discovery 1, and that ship looks freaking cool.
It does look very cool how it's, you got like the sphere at the front, you got like the line. Yeah, it is really cool.
One of the things that I thought was funny, and another thing that Kubrick predicted correctly was, I believe it's Frank is running along the wall, just jogging,
Mhm.
and
That's a cool sequence.
it's a very cool sequence. And what's funny about that is during Skylab 2, bringing them back up again, Alan Bean, in order to get exercise, would literally run in a giant circle around the space station because one of the walls in the space station was the inner tank section because they just built it out of a massive tank.
Right.
And so one of the things that NASA was like, "Hey, if you need exercise, run along this wall with your Velcro socks." So, like, you can find footage of the astronauts exercising and doing other crap on the space station, and one of them is just Alan Bean just running in a massive circle around it, just like Frank does.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in space and you're experiencing like artificial gravity, like I guess your bones kind of get used to that, so you kind of have to be as active as possible. Otherwise, you turn into like the fat people from Wally, I would assume.
um, with what we have now, it's just, hey, your bones just kind of undensify the longer you're in space. So that's why in the real world, everybody's doing exercise. I think with 2001, because it's very clear that they have like gravity generators or something on, especially like while Discovery One's out and about. To me, it's like, well, they have some type of gravity generator, or at least something that keeps them on the walls more than just Velcro, like we see with the Pan American spacecraft.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things that I have in here, I gotta find it now. Oh, was on one of the things that they say is that they're going to Tycho, and Tycho was an actual landing spot for the canceled Apollo 20 mission.
Okay, so like, yeah, Tycho on the moon. Okay, interesting.
I don't think when 2001 was being filmed, I don't think that was canceled yet. So I thought that was pretty cool. I liked the drinkable meals that they had, which to me was just like, I laughed when I saw them, because one of them is just like a box of cheese and it's got a straw sticking out of it.
Yeah, so you got like the drinkable food that Haywood drinks like on the way to the moon, and then you got like the more solid-ish food that they eat when they're on the Discovery with Hal. You know, because you got like stuff that looks like, I don't know, block orange, block brown, like just blocks of orange and brown and green, just like gross looking food, but like it's got protein to like keep them satisfied. So that's probably why they have to eat it.
Uh, I put in my notes, the reason it's all tube based in the film, along with like the weird looking like blocks, like you said, is because up until the space shuttle and the rise of the space stations, you couldn't. That was basically all you were given, was just like tubes, and here's a little packet of cubes that are beef flavored. Have at it. Throw some water in it.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine like you can't just bring regular food up into space. Like you kind of have to have like just this powder or this stuff that you just drink, you know, just to keep yourself energized because it's oh god.
NASA, this is one of my favorite fun facts. So on Gemini 3, one of the John Young, who was the pilot on the mission, smuggled a corned beef sandwich into space.
Oh.
And they're out, their flight was only like 5 hours long. So like they're halfway into the mission, and he just kind of reached into his suit and turned to Gus Grissom and was like, "Hey, you want a corned beef sandwich?" And they both ate a corned beef sandwich in space. And then they like got absolutely disgusted because like all the crumbs and everything were just like flinging around the cabin of the spacecraft.
Oh god.
So
how would they take a shit after that? Because like that's solid food. You can't just piss that out.
You know, that's a good question.
I mean, how long were they in space for?
It was only a 5 hour flight, so I guess you could just pinch the grumpy at that point.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, Barry's poking its head out of the woods at that point, but you know.
Also, I like that they reference a zero gravity toilet, because the International Space Station does indeed have a toilet that operates in zero gravity. And it, just like in the movie, if you like pause and try to read the instructions, again, he's a stickler for details.
He's a stickler for details.
And
I didn't pause to read all the detail. I didn't pause to read all the instructions, but I just love that it's like one shot of just like the guy reading all the instructions, and then it cuts to something else afterwards, because it's like that's all you need. That's all you really need in that situation.
Like, you can find videos of the International Space Station astronauts like giving you a tour of the space station, and I know there's one where it's like almost an hour long, where they go into like in-depth detail about like what goes on in this module. One of them is basically like, oh, this is where we do all of our stuff, our hygiene. You know, we take a crap or use the bathroom here. And it's like, so if you gotta pee, you gotta stick your member in a little tube, or you put your you know, it's a cup.
Yeah.
And you strap that around yourself if you gotta pee. But if you gotta take a dump, you gotta like strap yourself to the toilet. And even then, it's not completely guaranteed that you're gonna go into the trash bag that's in there. So like they're very prepared aboard there. They have like I think the one lady is like, yeah, we have a cleanup kit just in case things get messy, and it's always right here, so that way you can wipe everything down when you're done. And I'm just
Oh
like, oh my
boy.
god, I would not like. I want to go to space, but I wouldn't want to use the bathroom in space.
Yeah, no, that's one of those things where it's like it'd be nice to experience for maybe like a couple hours, but if I have to use the if it's long enough that I have to use the bathroom, it's not worth it, man. It's not worth it.
I just noticed in my notes I wrote controversy of an epidemic. This is Lyndon B. Johnson's America.
Linton B. Johnson's America. It's an epidemic. Uh,
Also, I like that the only thing that I disliked, but I thought it was a really nice touch, is whenever they're filming an obelisk, and you don't really see it at the Dawn of Man portion, but when they're investigating it on the moon, and especially at Jupiter, you just hear what is basically like the souls of the damned screaming out in like
that
agony and stuff.
Yeah. So we were talking about the music of Apollo 13. I love the music in this movie. Like, I love the orchestral suites that they use, like, the very famous musical scores that like we attribute to this movie. I forget the names. They're like in some foreign language. I forget the names of them specifically, but they're like, very famous suites that like predate the movie. But then you have like the original stuff where you have like this fucking yeah, like you said, the souls of the damned essentially of like when they every time they see a monolith, it's like it's haunting, but it's great. I love the sound design during the end when like Dave finds where he's just in like that bedroom and bathroom set, and like you hear like these echoes that are the best way I can describe it is like it reminds me of that scene in SB129, the SpongeBob episode where like Squidward just ends up in that white nothingness and you just hear like echoes of like murmuring and stuff like that. Like that's what it reminded me of.
I was very confused with the ending, but I like looking back on it and just like kind of um thinking about it more. It's a very good ending to what
Hmm.
otherwise is like a very wacky movie.
Yes.
Um, I in my notes I just have now Dave's in a Victorian era house in his pod in his spacesuit on the holodeck from Star Trek, and he's aged, but he hasn't aged, and now he's old and dead,
And now he's a space
and
baby.
now he's a space
Exactly.
baby.
Yeah, then he's the space fetus. It's like it's fucking wild. Again, I've seen this movie a bunch of times. I'm still figuring out what it all means, because it's like I don't know what to explain. I don't know how to explain the fucking space baby. Like, you think I know? It's like, I, I mean, from what I can gather, maybe it's a metaphor of rebirth because But like, how did he get to that point? Like that's one of those things that I'm still kind of struggling to understand.
I can definitely see it being an angle of rebirth because if you think about it, um, the apes at the beginning of the movie technically undergo a complete restructure where they go from just being like plain old apes to now they're using tools and walking almost upright and stuff. But
Yeah.
they still retain that small bit of their ape form where like they're hunched
Mhm.
over and like sometimes they'll like jump on all four legs and that I can see tying into why Dave's a fetus because that's basically the earliest version of a human.
Mhm. You know what? That's a good way of putting it. I mean, tying it into the ape scene at the beginning, like, yeah, that's essentially what happens. It's basically the birth of human ingenuity, the birth of what makes us human, discovery and stuff like that, like curiosity and like basically just anything you could come up with. I'm sure that applies to it. Like that's how broad this movie's theming is. Just like you can apply just like anything you can think of to it.
I do want to backtrack a little bit in the plot. I love
Mhm.
Frank's death sequence in this film. It is like
Mm.
you can feel the tension rising and then it's just Hal takes over and he kills him, but you don't see Hal kill him. It's just
Yeah.
it's just the pod flies at the camera and next thing you see is Frank's just flying off in space. And I thought that was really cool.
It's the silence that really gets you because you're out in the middle of space, there's literally no sound, and, like, it would've been so easy, and this is why I'm glad Kubrick directed this movie because any other hack director would have put in like tense music. It would just be like da, 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 or like just some backing track to make it like, oh, this is when you're supposed to feel tense. But it's like, no, it's completely silent when that happens. And that's what adds to it because you're just like, ugh. Like you audibly gasp when you see that happen. It's insane.
I really loved how, and I make note of this throughout my notes here. I really love how whenever there's a sequence and you see them inside the spacecraft, there's always the sound of the environmental systems running in the background. So
Hmm.
it's not like what you have in say like Apollo 13, where there's a bit of orchestral music in the background, or like in any other space film where it's supposed to be like where they're like, oh, this is happening, and you have that little bit of music happening, and there's like that's the only background noise besides
Hmm.
like maybe a clang or two. Um, Especially like I hate to bring it up, Armageddon. Like when they're on the Russian space station in that movie, it's just here's some very tense music playing and like gas hissing, and that's all you get. But with 2001, it's oh, we're inside. There's now like what sounds like an AC is running in the background because that's how the environmental systems sound on spacecraft. So I
Yeah,
thought that was a very nice touch. And especially when they're going to the monolith on the moon, where it cuts
mhm.
from like shots from the outside and then like it goes inside. So you have the silence of outside, and then all of a sudden it's just, here's noise happening because you're now inside the little moon shuttle.
Yeah, it's attention to detail that really makes this movie like just as masterfully crafted as it is. Like that's it's like things you probably wouldn't, or maybe like the average person wouldn't pick up on, but it's always nice to see when you do pick up on it.
I love the attention to detail on all the spacecraft, and I've said that
Mhm.
before, but I really like how on some of the spacecraft they have the massive reaction control system thruster pods, and you can see like little like lines, especially on that Pan Am like egg thing that goes to the moon, where
Mhm.
you see like little lines running from where the thrusters would fire. So there's like little lines that help direct the thruster when it fires. And I thought that was really cool and such a nice little detail. And like others where it's just like, oh, this section's probably where like the engines are, so like there's radiators there, and it's just like all the small little details that a space nerd like me would love is in this film.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of cool things, I really like the spacesuit designs in this film.
Me
They're
too.
they're iconic. On the like they're on that path where it's like spacesuits have slimmed down, but you still have that like bulky component to it.
Yeah, but I like how the helmet looks. Like it's an iconic look. It like and it looks like it would be useful, but like again, it's like this iconic look. Like no other helmets in any other movie look like that, and I appreciate that detail.
I like the helmets because it's like they unlike like say with Apollo where they have the fish bowls so you can see everything. With this it's like, well, you don't really need to see above you. So we got a little like visor that sticks out so, the sun won't hit your eyes right away. And
Yeah.
but you still have that field of vision where you can like look to your left, right, and below you. So I always thought that was I thought that was really cool. And I like the life support backpacks that they're like on the front. You don't see
Mhm.
that a whole lot in spacesuit design.
No, it looks like it looks like Darth Vader's thing in Star Wars.
Yes, yes. I also liked how the spacesuits were color coded on Discovery 1. So like Dave's
Hmm.
is red, Frank's was yellow, and then you have the other ones that are there for the other people that they're just tragically never mentioned, and oh, now they're mentioned, but now they're dead.
Now they're dead. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing with this movie is like it has so many details, but it never explains anything. So it's like up to you as an audience member to kind of like fill in the blanks yourself. And I appreciate that. I love when movies do that. As someone who absolutely hates being talked down to by a movie, I appreciate when me as an audience member, I can like interpret it the way I want to. Like I have control of the film. You know what I'm trying to say?
When yeah, no, 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 I understand. When they're going off to Jupiter and it's like, oh, these three are in cryo sleep. My mind went, okay, they're important, but they're not important enough to ship systems, so they're just gonna, wake up when they get to Jupiter, because that's how a lot of things would actually happen in future spaceflight if we get to that point.
Sure. And then yeah, they're just like, nope, they're dead. It's like that part always freaked me out too, because like you don't even see them suffer when they die. Like you just see like you just see them flatline, and then that's it. And it's like, oh god, like you wouldn't even be conscious when you die. Like that fucking terrify. I mean, what would be worse, being conscious or not being conscious? Like I don't know. Like, but that still is like such an existential thing that like really fucked with me when I first watched it, and it still kind of does now. It's just like, oh god, like Kubrick, you mad genius, you.
It reminded me a lot of, there's a Next Generation episode from Star Trek where there's this random Earth satellite like way out in deep space, and the Enterprise finds it, and Data's like, "Hey, we have time to do something. Can I go explore?" And I think Riker's in command for some reason, or no, it might be Picard. But one of them just goes, "Yeah, take Worf with you just in case." And like they go aboard, and Data's like, "Oh, this is a cryosleep spacecraft that was developed so people who had terrible diseases could wake up." And Worf's just, going along, and he's like, I wonder if any of these people are still alive. And he rubs the frost off the glass, and you just see a skeleton.
Oh,
and I was
yeah.
like, that's pretty cool. I'd imagine that happens if, in the future.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like you're left there too long. Yeah, that's what happens.
But yeah, no, it was really interesting because I liked that he used the vitals as a way of showing that somebody's dying, and it also reminded me of Star Trek the original series, because whenever anybody lays down on a bed in that freaking show, their vitals are just instantly appearing on the screen, and I was like, "Yep, this reminds me. This is very 60s."
This is very 60s. That's right. This would have been around the same time as the OG series.
I believe Star Trek would have been on their third season at the time.
Yeah, because they went from 66 to 69, right?
60. It's either 68 or early 69. It's one of those two.
Okay. Right.
What else do I have in my notes here? Oh, I liked the meeting room on the moon because it gave off a very Doctor Strangelove feel to me.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, Doctor Strangelove for sure. I mean, it's the same. I mean, not only is it the same time period, it's the same director.
Because I said to Amber, I was like, I don't think I've watched a Kubrick film before, and they were like, no, you have Doctor Strangelove. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, Doctor Strangelove was my first Kubrick film too.
So I had Doctor Strangelove in the back of my mind, and as soon as they got to the meeting room, I just went, that is Doctor Strangelove right there.
Yeah.
Just in a future room, instead of here's all the big bulky stuff. It's here's a very refined room. Here's all the important people in a square instead of a circle, and somebody speaking to them.
Yeah, there's no big board.
You can't fight in here, gentlemen. This is the war room.
Oh god, I love Doctor Strangelove. Yeah, do you have anything else you wanted to say?
The only thing that I thought was weird, and I noticed this throughout the film, was anything up until Discovery 1 at least, anything that was important in space had a red hue to it. I.e., the cockpits for every spacecraft in the film up until Discovery 1 are just covered in red lighting. And
yeah,
it was so like off-putting to me. Like I understand why you would do that, because I believe in submarines they use red lighting for the command rooms on there, but like this is a spacecraft. It would just be irregular lighting at that point.
Yeah. I think it just looks cool.
No, it does. But it was just like seeing it, it's like, oh well, that's the command room, that's where the cockpit is because it's red. And then like they get to Hal's computer storage area, and that's all red, and I'm like, so are all the cockpits red because there's a HAL in it, or like another AI? But Discovery 1 doesn't have that, and that's, controlled by an AI.
Yeah, that is weird, actually, now that you bring that up, because, like, yeah, why would it always be red? Like, is that supposed to imply, like, color theory? But, like, what's the color theory? What does red represent?
And the other thing that I thought was really cool was the, like, main command mission screen on the Discovery 1. You have all these little things, all these little CRT screens, and they're like, ah, this is propulsion, this is life support, this is like storage stuff, this is HAL stuff. And then like it all looks realistic and stuff, and then you just have HAL, and he looks like he's just floating in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I thought that was funny.
He's always ever present because I mean he's everywhere on the ship. That's why like there's that scene where like the only way they can get any privacy from Hal is just going into one of the pods and then like turning off all communications from inside the pod. But even then, you know, Hal can still see them
Yeah, he just
and he
lip
can still
reads.
see he just lip reads and because he's an AI, he can do that. It's just like, oh god. Like you can't escape, you know?
One of the things that I thought was funny, and I mentioned this in my notes, was apparently the U.S. never has inflation between 68 and 2001 in the film, because for a guy who's on a space station orbiting Earth, I'd imagine the call to, especially to FaceTime somebody, would be
Yeah.
a lot more monetary value, that it would cost a lot more than just $1.70.
Yeah, that's true. It's just like, oh, it's $1.70. Okay.
You're making collect call? Alright, it's $1.70, chief.
Yeah, okay. I mean, sweet. If it is $1.70, sweet. But at the same time, I don't know.
This is LBJ's America.
LPG's America. God damn it.
But yeah, no.
That's-
Overall, I thought the film was fantastic.
oh yeah, it's
I'm very surprised that I never watched it before I watched it, and it's like, why didn't I watch this before?
yeah. Well, it's good to get it out now. You know, it's like I mean, yeah, it is a bit of a hard watch to get through the first time around. I mean, not for everybody. I mean, you seem to have enjoyed it, and that's good. Like, because it is an important film. But like, yeah, it's just one of those films that like even you just got to see it. Honestly, like it needs to be seen. Like we can sit here and explain every little detail, but like it's not going to do it justice. Like you if you out there listening have never seen this movie, please watch it. It's so good.
I really don't know what it is about anything that is from the '60s, because you have 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you have all these
Mhm.
small details that are in it, and then you also have Marooned, which came out, I believe, a year later, if not
I think
the
yeah,
same
I think
time
you told me
period.
about that.
And
Yeah.
Maroon has like the almost the exact same detailing that Apollo 13 does, and with the same style of detailing that I'd imagine a Kubrick film would have, but it's not
Mhm.
directed by him. So it's like, what was going on that everybody was like, ah, we're gonna do this, so we need X amount of detail in it.
Once the astronauts went up, people only wanted to play with space toys.
It really seems like a lot of detailing is a lost art in modern cinema, which
Mm,
is a little upsetting, but at the same time,
mhm.
it's like, I understand why, because everything doesn't rely on props anymore.
Yeah, a lot of it is CGI. I mean, you do occasionally get the movies that still have their details to them, but no, you're absolutely right. It's not as common as it once was, for sure.
We need
Which,
to go revive Stanley Kubrick.
yeah, we need him to make that Napoleon movie he said he was going to make, and he never did.
We need him to explain what 2010 First Contact was supposed to mean.
Well, he didn't make 2010.
Oh, he needs to make 2010 then.
Yeah, he needs to be the one. I mean, I've seen 2010. It's been a couple of years since I've seen it. I remember thinking it was fine, but it's notorious. I mean, granted, I would imagine any sequel to like a movie as beloved as this would be highly scrutinized. I get it, but I remember it being fine. But at the same time, it has been a couple of years, and my tastes have changed rapidly. So it's entirely possible it doesn't hold up. Obviously, compared to the original, no freaking way does it hold up compared to the original. Like it's not even close. But you're absolutely right. Kubrick needs to remake it.
Like, I'm looking at the plot for 2010 First Contact, and it's like, this sounds exactly like something that Kubrick would have made, and it's such a shame that he didn't.
Yeah. Oh well. So, was there anything last minute you wanted to say before we get into talking about the whether we want to keep it or not?
So the NASA's space shuttle fleet, one of them is named Discovery. One of the reasons
Mm.
it's named Discovery is due in part to 2001: A Space Odyssey and the fact that the spacecraft in there is named Discovery 1.
Uh, Is that really such a good idea? Naming it after the ship that doesn't complete its mission?
Well, I mean, Discovery is one of the few that wasn't damaged in space, so it worked.
Oh, well, that's true. Actually, that's true, yeah. But as long as they don't make, like, an actual AI and call him Hal, you know?
What are you talking about? If we make an AI, somebody's going to name it Hal.
That's true, yeah, well. Oh, well.
Oh, and the last fun
Yeah.
fact I have, Hal, is
Yeah.
have you ever watched WWE or any of the wrestling shows, like WCW?
The extent of my knowledge of wrestling is from you, Chief.
Okay. Which is just if Vince McMahon blows up in a limo.
Exactly. And he fights God.
And he fights a god. So, one of the top stars of the 80s and 90s, his name's Ric Flair. He was always a big showboater about how rich he was and blah, 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 because the people made him rich. That was one of his gimmicks. Or that was his gimmick. But his intro music is the theme to 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like, the opening sequence of 2001: A Space Odyssey with that theme playing, that's Ric Flair's entrance theme, and it's so funny to me.
That's incredible. All right. So yeah, now that we've talked about it, I would say, do you have this on any nice Blu-ray or DVD? Do you own it physically?
I have somewhere, I don't know where it is. I own this somewhere in my house. I think it's in my old bedroom, but I think it was just a DVD. I don't think it was a Blu-ray release, but I know I own this movie somewhere, and it's in my collection, and I'm proud to own that now.
Yeah, so you're gonna keep it then?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna keep it.
Awesome. Yeah, same with me. I have it on a nice Blu-ray. I think this is definitely something I'd like to own on 4K someday because it definitely looks great and I feel like it would look even better in 4K, but for now, I think this Blu-ray is fine enough. I like the cover. It's the shot of Dave in the red suit walking through the white tunnel. And it's a very iconic shot. I mean, basically, you could take any shot from this movie and make it the cover, and it would look awesome. So, honestly, it looks cool. The movie itself looks cool. The movie itself, I love. So, this is a total keep in my collection. So, there you have it.
I couldn't find my physical copy, so I had to resort to very legal means of watching it online.
No, naturally, of
and
course.
My favorite thing was the description for the movie on the legal website I was on said,
Yeah.
19 I don't remember how the beginning of it went, but it went 2001, a spacecraft goes to Jupiter. But something happens. What happened? Find out in this Odyssey. And I'm like, what?
No, that's exactly what happens. That's a very accurate description of what happens.
Hold on, I need to see if I can find it real quick because
Please do.
So here it is. 1999. The astronaut exploring the moon discover a mysterious black obelisk. 2001. Between Earth and Jupiter, smart machine of spacecraft made a mistake, which kill almost all the crew. What happened?
That's incredible. Oh, that's awesome. Oh god, yeah, that's exactly what happens. That is the best
Yeah,
way
it's not wrong.
Yeah. Something happens. What happened?
What happened?
Find out. Oh, that's good. That's good. All right, Chris. I think that about does it. Um, we had a lot to say. I think this is the longest episode of the podcast so far. I feel like I say that a lot, but it's true. I think we have uh, overtaken the previous record. So
I feel like all of your when you post these in Discord, I feel like every single one of them is this is the longest episode. This is the longest. Like it just keeps going and going.
Yeah, it keeps going and going. We're gonna, you know what? These could go for as long as they want. It doesn't matter to me. I just wish my microphone hadn't broke. But so yeah, for those of you listening, sorry, it's been an hour and a half. But yeah, my microphone does not work, so I had to resort to my laptop microphone. So that's probably why I sound like ass right now. So,
I will
apologies.
say, if you do use the audio that I'm sending, because I'm recording both me and you sound perfectly fine on my end. So
okay, so I guess we'll just have to see how it goes. In any case, Chris, please, by all means, shout out what you want to shout out, plug your stuff. Where can people find you?
You can find me on the Spacechris7 channel, Spacechris7. Let me get that correct. You can find me there on YouTube. You can also find me at Mr. Dr. Chris on Twitter, where I make funny things sometimes, or you'll see me just shitpost about space and other related bullcrap.
Nice.
But I would say if you're gonna come to YouTube, be prepared. Me and James and my other friends, we kind of just sit down and dub over video games, and they take like 20,000 episodes, and we have a lore document that's like 70-something pages long.
I've seen the lore document. It's very long.
But Hal, thank you for having me on. I've had a lot of fun.
Oh, dude, thanks for coming on. I'm glad you recommended these movies. I had a lot of fun too discussing them. This was awesome. So, thank you all for watching and listening and doing whatever it is you did to get to this point. And we'll see you all later, whenever that may be. Bye-bye, everybody. Just